Hi, everybody. Welcome to In Deep with Shiro and Mehreen, hosted by Soul-ution. So, we are here, and Mehreen, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Excited.
All right, so today is a memorable day because this is going to be our first podcast together. And we properly titled it In Deep because we will go in deep to all topics that eventually expands our consciousness and adds value to our spiritual journey. But today is a topic that I really wanted to tackle for a while, and that is on the topic of toxic positivity. What do you...
Well,
Yes, go ahead.
what's your definition of toxic positivity?
Well, before we get into toxic positivity,
Okay.
well, I was going to ask you that. So,
okay.
You
It's a
kind of
wavelength.
No, I want to say the actual definition that I came up with, but I want to ask you what makes you what do you think of when you hear that term?
The term spiritual bypassing also comes to mind. And
Ooh.
I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's the sort of dislike of the heavier, darker work that we need to do in addition to, always staying. It's not just love and light all the time, right?
Okay.
It's a balance.
Ooh,
And
I
so
like that.
spiritual bypassing to me is when you're going down this highway of life. Not to get all deep with you, but
Right.
it's appropriate.
Well,
Given the title, right?
That's what we're here for.
Right, exactly. And you've got all of these offshoots and exits, and the ones that are all triggering or have to do with trauma or shame or those lower or negative feelings.
Yeah.
A lot of people kind of zoom by them.
Yes.
And those are important avenues to go down.
Okay.
To do all of the work, to be balanced, to be whole.
Well, you're kind of totally like just summarizing the whole podcast tonight.
Great.
So, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to be talking about. But for the listeners, I want to definitely first and foremost define what positive actually is. So what's positive to you if you were to define positivity or positive, what comes to mind for you?
Authenticity. I think I know that I compartmentalize a lot, and I'm working on that. And I think it's easy for a lot of us to focus on staying positive and keep your vibe high. And I say this all sarcastically because sometimes you need to feel the depth of whatever it is that's going on, because that's how you gain the insight and the clarity. And by going all the way down, you're able to go all the way up as well.
Okay.
But it really is it's a spectrum.
All right.
So positivity is being authentic and getting to the bottom of what it is that you're trying to work through. And then...
Wow, you're already going deep, aren't you?
I can't.
I just kind of wanted to get a little more basic definition of positive first.
Well,
all right.
There we
So
go.
let's just take a little more. Let's start from the surface, and then we'll go diving into the deeper aspect as we go. But for example, for me, positive is upward movement. Something that is forward movement as well, right? Something that adds, obviously, right? Because it's positive, which is addition, right? So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
I think that nails it. Yeah.
And I also have to definitely acknowledge that that's kind of who we are at our base, right? We're basically designed to be positive because in the end, we're made of light. And light is the positive polarity or definition of positive polarity, I guess. It's because it illuminates, right? So our base design, even with love, is also a positive force, correct?
Yeah.
Would you say?
It should be, right?
Yeah. Okay, so in that sense, we kind of have this sense of positive being a lot of things that's good. Let's go into more how does it feel? How does positive feel to you?
Like being outside on a sunny day and you're just You just feel the warmth and the light, and there's
Yeah.
birds flying around, and
Okay.
it's lovely.
Okay. Yeah. So what else? What else comes to mind?
With positivity,
Yeah, like how does it feel? How does positive feel to you?
it's almost less of like, how does it make me feel and like what it makes me not feel. So, like, the self loathing and just cloudiness and all of the negativity's gone, It's like, I think of those allergy med commercials
Mm-hmm.
where, like, the person's walking around and there's a gray filter on everything and they see the cat, they want to pet the cat,
Mm.
but they just sneeze instead. And then
Yeah.
post pill, it's like, the world is colorful. They can cuddle the cat just fine. You can interact with things, and it's not as heavy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, that's good. It's not as heavy. I like that. So you're adding density to this.
yeah.
Okay, so then essentially positive is light, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a sense of density.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you said it best.
There you go. I also feel like, well, obviously positive feels good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Happy. That's another one. What about strength? Positive also, does it associate itself to strength, sense of power?
I mean, it's not the first thing that would come to mind,
Yes.
but it does make sense.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So that's very good.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I wanted to really get into this is because it's very prevalent in the spiritual community, especially, and with the movement that is occurring, that there's a lot of emphasis on positivity, right? Positive thinking. When I think it was in the 90s, I don't know how long ago, but because I was there for that, but um, law of attraction was introduced, and a lot of people started talking about it. And the thing that created was, of course, that people started to own their path of life, that they realized that what they are and what they are transmitting in their state of being is attracting the experiences in their life, and which is wonderful, right? For me, like I came from the religious background, so I always associated good things happening to me being pleasing to God, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was all about, is it the will of God? So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a sense of ownership, but there was a sense of somebody else having the sovereignty of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense of having the understanding of law of attraction, you start to understand that you're creating your reality. You're attracting the experiences in your life. That's wonderful. However, the phenomena that it also created was that there now becomes this sense of fear of having negative thoughts or being in a negative state, and therefore this concern that we're going to create negative experiences or bad uh, outcomes. And there created a phenomena that I'm now observing and noticing throughout my sessions with different clients is that there's a sense of toxic positivity. And here's where the definition of toxic positivity is. And that is that I kind of phrased it like this: the emphasis of positivity that simultaneously denies the value and validity of the negative. Now, what that means is that this kind of goes back to, this is something that I've been kind of, I've done an episode on YouTube already about this, and that is that all things come in equal polarity, right? So, in other words, positive really can't be positive without the negative, as light is not recognized as light until there's contrast. And so, in the end, just like superheroes, right? Every superhero has superpowers, but at the same time, they have the same vulnerability somewhere else. And that's what makes it believable. That's what makes us more relatable
Mm-hmm.
and makes the whole story more enjoyable in the end. So all things come in equal polarity. And that applies to the definition of positivity. And yet, I notice that there are a lot of practices where, oh my God, it's negative, get that away from me, I don't like it, or even darkness is defined as something negative. And that's where I feel that I don't see that that's a true state of positivity. And that's where the in the end, it also creates this fear that when you're not positive, that you're creating a negative or a bad trajectory for yourself. And that's where the toxicity comes in, right? Because you start to criticize and start to police your behaviors and also start policing other people's behaviors. Oh my God, what you're saying is so negative. Don't say that, right? And there's this sense of surrealism in regards to what a spiritual journey really is. And that's what I really wanted to address today. What do you think?
Lots of things. I mean, as you're saying that, it makes me think about the instances where I feel like I'm being negative and
Mm-hmm.
you know, you almost have this bit of judgment with yourself of like, why are you going down that rabbit hole?
Mm-hmm.
Don't be negative, yada,
Mm-hmm.
yada.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's a balancing act of, I can't stop myself from having those intrusive thoughts that pop up of what if this happens or, XYZ. And now instead of letting them all kind of float around, I'll very categorically follow that thought. I'm like, okay, well, if that happens, so what? And then what? And then
Mm-hmm.
usually by probing it, I'm like, it wasn't that bad anyway. There's nothing to really
Right.
be afraid of. So I think that, being human means we inherently feel negative at times and
Absolutely.
it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's quite informative. So
Yes.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we need to debunk the myth, right? That being spiritual somehow equates to all positive or all good or very moral, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what we do when there's a spiritual leader or a pastor or president or any kind of leader. There is some kind of a moral measurement as to how good they are.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you see a spiritual leader or a pastor having a fit or cussing somebody out
Being
or getting
human,
pissed off or
right?
being human, that somehow it begins to disqualify who they are as that particular title or category. And that's within us deeply in our subconscious that we're finally getting over even like being able to cuss, for example, as equating to some kind of lack of morality.
Mm-hmm.
But yet there's still a lot of sense that because we live in a world, we're measured by performance and result. Yet what we understand and what we know spiritual journey to be, it has nothing to do with the amount of things that we achieve or accomplish. That it's about the state of being, as we are, in the end, human beings and not human doings. And yet, there's no real honor to just being who we are. And that's where we are headed, though. In this journey, we're learning to release the need to be doing something for us to have or have to be of any value
Mm-hmm.
to this world and to ourselves.
That validation and
Absolutely.
getting brownie points in the eyes of family or
Yes.
partners or in the workplace.
Yes.
Yeah.
We all have somewhere struggled with the sense of earning love, earning respect. And yet, when we allow ourselves to just be, we often access the sense of affluence and access the sense of who we really are, authenticity. And even, I don't know, I guess it's a philosopher, but I kind of vaguely remember like Carl Jung, for example. I mean, he addresses the importance of embracing both the light and the shade within us.
Yeah. I think it was along the lines of like, I'm to have a dark side if I'm to be whole, something along those
Absolutely.
lines.
Wouldn't
And
that, and isn't that
yeah.
true? But do we really do that? And that's the thing that I really wanted to get into today is that to understand or to embody true state of positivity is when we begin to become aware that first that we are made of light, but as long as we are light, that there is shade. And that as long as we are light and shade, and this is what I love about like Star Wars, for example, because it never talks about eliminating the dark side. It always talks about the balance of the force. And it is that balance in which the universe stays in its most natural state and its most affluent state. And that's where the beauty of creation occurs, right?
Mm.
I mean, photographers, it's all about light and contrast. When we paint, we start with a white canvas that has nothing. As soon as there's contrast, there's creation. So then contrast is vital part of all creation and our very being in existence.
It's so true. And I love that you use photography because I definitely understand that. I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah, that's
flat
your language.
photos, just no highlights, no shadows. Get out of
Right.
here. So when you say affluent, I think
Hmm.
when people hear that word, they can maybe think of like the negative connotation of,
Hmm.
having to do with like a class scale or something. What does affluence mean in this
To me,
capacity?
affluence, when I think of affluence, is a state of flow, a state where we are flowing in our most authentic state, which is where we maximize our base potential, right? We came into this world through and after a meticulous designing process with the intention of accomplishing our karmic agenda and to accomplish our soul purpose. And from that, we created a design, or we co created a design for who we are. So you are who you are, and you are like no one else. As your fingerprint is like no one else, your very being and what your design is like no one else. And therefore, you are Mehreen and I am Shiro. And we both have certain inclinations, right? Uh, we like spicy foods, or we like rock and roll, or, you like things beautiful. I like things to be, you know, like really smooth or whatever. So, in other words, every preference, the beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. So we all have a certain strength and certain weaknesses, or certain um, trajectory that we created from our base design. So if we don't learn who we are, then we won't really know what our definition of positive is and what our definition of our negative is. And so ultimately, the true state of positivity, it aligns with our sense of affluence, right? The sense of, in order to have us, to be in a state of affluence means that our abilities are um, best
Mhm.
expressed, I guess, for lack of better words.
Is it kind of like a flow state of just
Yeah,
whatever you're,
yeah,
you're
because
just vibing?
an affluent person executes their
Mhm.
plans real well, or they seem to have a very balance in their wealth, sense of wealth or health.
Mhm.
They access their talent and they express it smoothly and well. I guess that I haven't. That's a very good question. I didn't actually define affluence in that regard. But yes, I didn't. I wasn't even aware that he had a sort of a stigma to it either.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe less of a stigma and more of just an established definition, but
Yeah.
I know it's useful for me, so I think
Mm-hmm.
that'll resonate with the
Yeah.
audience as well.
Yeah. That's a good question. Thank you. Yeah. So that's kind of the topic that I really wanted to dive into today, because again, with that, we go into, then how do we really, get into understanding um, our light, and how do we understand our shade, and what's in the shade? What, is something that we really wanted to get into. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So, in the end, one of the things that I really think about is, for example, when we're interacting with someone, when we encounter things outside of us, that's another one, right? Because it's one thing to see the negative within us. That's definitely the topic that we're going to really save for the juicy part of the latter uh, part of this program. But you know, let's talk about like people that are negative that we interact with. Why do we interact with certain people? Why do we encounter certain experiences that is negative?
It's a great question. Lately, I've been thinking that these are all just mirrors for me. Usually, these negative people, are exposing things in myself that, you know, when I experience the negativity through them from my perspective, I'm like, that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, wait, I do kind of the same thing.
Okay.
So that really sucks. Now I know how much it sucks from a new perspective. I'm going to work on that.
That's a good point. And let me ask you this. Is that something that just came to you naturally in the sense of immediately reflecting back at yourself and seeing that as a mirror? Because many people would their initial reaction is a sense of victimization, correct?
Yeah, and this was not a natural, or an instant realization. This has taken a little bit of work.
Okay.
I definitely would feel attacked, and I still do. I'm not saying I'm like a saint right now. I'm still very much a
What
work
is a
in
saint?
progress. Exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, it's definitely taken some work and
Okay.
yeah, a little bit of self accountability
Right.
as well.
So usually, or the most familiar reaction to negativity is that we see that as outside of ourselves. We see that as an opposition. We see that as a violation sometimes, right? We feel victimized. There's temptation to blame, right? You made me feel this way. You did this to me. Or why is that person like that? Um, uh, and even when we encounter negative experiences, why is this happening to me?
Why me? That's
Right,
unfair.
right.
Yeah.
In other words, we see it separate from ourselves. And where we are overall shifting toward from the age of Pisces to age of Aquarius, that after 2,150 years or so, um, the great conjunction that took place in December 21st to 2020, a new age has opened. And with that new age, it is said that the age of Pisces was a representation of individualism, competitiveness, right? Separation consciousness, just to name a few. And as we shift into the age of Aquarius, that now we are into, is more about the community mindset, unity consciousness, support, synergy, harmony, that kind of thing. And when we think about unity consciousness, what that is saying, right, is that ultimately we are one. I remember a biblical passage that Jesus talks about that we are a body. That how can a one body say part of a body say to another part, I don't need you, right? In other words, we all function as a different part of one body, the singularity, because this is where we're from. We're from one source of light in which we sort of evaporated from the ocean of oneness as droplets, right? Having the illusionary experience of individualism.
We're
Right?
all just in a cosmic diffuser.
Yes, basically. Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And we're here to add different spices in life, correct? So if we were to begin to restore the sense of oneness, then everyone is us. You are me and I am you. And to the extent that the moment we share an experience in a reality experience, shared reality experience, we are mirroring one another. And so that means that when we encounter something outside of us that is negative, then, like you said, exactly, which is that it is reflecting a part of us back at us. And that is really the way we are helped to be brought to awareness of those things within. And that's where, if we don't go inward with that experience and we are stayed in the state of victimization, state of blame, then we continually perpetuate that is sort of giving us that sign, right? So usually when we have that recurring experience of some type of negativity, that is usually a way for us to bring awareness to something that we're unaware of, a part of something that is in the shadow within ourselves.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Calls attention to it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's easy to float right by it.
Yeah, and if we were able to do that, then we would not need to fight. We would not need to judge or to attack or fight back, uh, or feel victimized by that type of encounter. Is the thought here.
Stuff.
Wow.
Taking notes.
You are. I was hoping you would just elaborate a whole lot more on this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going through, I'm human, and I literally had an instance today where I felt victimized instead of, choosing. I think when you're sitting here calmly with a friend, and it's very easy to say, yeah, take the higher path and everything's a mirror. But, I mean, even with me knowing that, it's very much a practice and an exercise, and choosing to go with that perspective.
Yeah.
And it's definitely an evolution.
Yeah, because in the end, like you said, when you encounter somebody like that, you said now you're at a point where you can go, wait a minute, that's something I would do or something that I can see myself doing. Now, I can definitely share my personal journey. I recall a time where I experienced abuse in my youth. And I remember even then, amidst that experience, immediately feeling that I've done this to somebody before. And, back then I didn't know anything about any type of previous life. I didn't even believe in reincarnation for that matter. So there was no sense of how could I? I've never done that before. But I was, I had a very interesting sort of life journey where I was bullied, but at the same time, I have also bullied others before as well. And so that was also helpful. But this was a time where that was happening to me, and I was aware that I have been this sort of a perpetrator before. And so in the end, if we have been wounded, then we can immediately assume, because also this is where law of equal polarity applies, is that we've also wounded others before, whether it was in this lifetime or not. That immediately, when we experience tragedy, we know that there's blessing on the other side. Right? The one that I always use is like the most recent was like Kobe Bryant's helicopter crash. It was tragedy. I mean, I don't know, especially for people who were fans of Kobe Bryant, and especially because he was with his daughter, who was sort of the hopeful star of the women's basketball. And while everybody heart sunk, right, with that news of tragedy, not just because of them, but also because it was multiple people with families that were on the helicopter. But at the same time, simultaneously, we must remember that that tragedy halted the world to connect with a sense of compassion. It made everyone think about their life for a second.
And their families and their loved
Absolutely.
ones.
Especially fathers, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Reappreciating, or valuing, or being more present with their time with their daughter, for example. So in other words, with every tragedy, some kind of upward movement. Every time there's a dip, there's an upward.
It's a pendulum, in my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah. And so then even when we consider negative within us or around us, we always have to remember that that is also shifting something in the positive direction as well. And as we begin to embrace, because in the end, I think a true state of enlightenment is that we embrace both sides of the spectrum, that we are in that middle state where we give equal value and an appreciation to our light and to our shade. That,
Yeah.
to me, is the true state of positivity.
Does that have anything to do with 0 point and
Well,
balance
zero
in that
point.
regard?
Oh boy, yeah. Now you're talking about, a much deeper topic. Because 0 point is a point that we reset with our source creator, that we come to a place of sort of a blank slate, that and it's got a lot to do with all kinds of other aspects of quantum entanglement. So, that is a wormhole that you're
Okay.
opening up there.
If you guys want to hear about this, let us know.
Absolutely, let us
Future
know.
episode.
Yeah. But yeah, 0 point is definitely part of that as well,
Mhm.
because like you said, it's true that when we when that because that's the 0 point is when we make peace, right? It's sort of synonymous to closures, synonymous to um, peacemaking, right? Is when I've talked about closure before, and it's a very important part as well, is that in order for us to not perpetuate certain negative cycles in our lives, we need to give it that cycle a closure. When someone hates their job, I hate my boss, and they get another job, they usually come back with some kind of another, I hate my job or I hate my boss, because it's not the job. It's them taking something with them. It's them projecting something in their experience. Because in the end, if you continue to believe that life is simply happening to you, which is completely saying that there's no sovereignty within you,
Mhm.
that's relinquishing complete ownership of your path. But if you shift the paradigm to life is responding to you, then if you are done with a job that has a toxic boss or toxic employee or environment, the true state of closure, which is the 0 point, is for you to make peace with that season of your life, to say, you know what, this was a tough job, but I learned a lot.
Mhm.
And you begin to access both the positive. What are some of the great things that you experienced in the job? And what are some of the things that you learned from the toxicity around you? And what are some of the things that came out of you? What triggered you? Because what triggers you, the reaction that comes out, is already there, in which this job, this employee, coworker, or boss help to bring it to the surface, to your conscious awareness. And as you begin to own all of this, right, that's when the 0 point is approaches. That's when we have closure. That's when we say, this was wonderful. This was everything that I needed to learn and be inspired by, and I give it full closure of the season. And most likely, then your shift is complete. You're ready to transition.
It seems like a reconciliation of the emotions of what you're experiencing with what's the purpose of this? I try to treat everything as like a chapter in the curriculum of life. And when I mean, I've had that exact instance that you're speaking of many times. And I got to a point where I'm like, what's the point of this?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly this is a cycle. It's like nightmares.
Right.
Um, when you have repeat dreams or repeat nightmares, it's this systemic sort of issue that you have that needs to be resolved.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's been interesting approaching negative experiences from that perspective of, okay, what's the lesson here? Because clearly this is presenting itself time and time again for a
Mm.
reason. But then you're not done at that point, right? Like
Right.
now that you know what the lesson is or what the wound is or the trigger. And this kind of touches on yesterday for me. I was kind of going through this entire experience of, okay, this wound is here, the pain is there.
Mm-hmm.
Do I still want to hang on to it? Or
Yeah.
am I done with it now? Can I
Yeah.
move on?
Yeah.
And, hopefully we choose the latter.
Yeah, and I think that part of what signifies that we are are approaching or reaching a 0 point is when we also, some of the symptoms that we can look for is a sense of peace, of course, a sense of releasing of the resistance. In other words, as long as we're still going, God, I just want to get out of here, or I just want to be done with this, that's still resistant energy, and therefore there is still something there, because when the 0 point is reached, it's the float state. It's the literally like a floating state where you are no longer pushing or pulling. And that's kind of a good way to gauge where you are with that particular trigger in your life. The way usually it comes to me when sitting with a client about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the thing. But when we take it even deeper, I want to just kind of for a second take it even deeper. Going back to that topic that we said that they're all reflecting a part of us, right? If let's just talk about another person, a relationship, or coworker, or a boss. It's a relationship, and with that, there's an agreement, right? Even between a perpetrator and victim, there is a relationship because in order for that reality to occur, there has to be a polarity pole between the two. Oftentimes, between a bully and uh, the victim of bully, is that there is a state of powerlessness that's bonding the two, right? One is acting on their state of powerlessness to make them feel like they have power, and the other is in the passive state of relinquishing their power by perpetuating the state of powerlessness.
So somebody who's in a state of constant positivity and love and light and kind of turning their back on everything else, are they actually just drawing in more of the negative that they're trying to avoid?
Well, it depends on the quality that you're of, the inner workings of that particular state of positivity. Has that person is that person emulating that state of positivity because they processed or integrated the negative in their life, or that they have full awareness of their potential of the other polarity? In other words, because even when you think about hate to say ability, because it's love isn't really something to do, has something to do with action per se, but let's just say, for lack of better words, ability to love. They have to also be aware of the ability to hurt or destroy, violate as well. And with that comes that sense of true love, right? So yeah, absolutely. Um, Without the other, you cannot. Is That's the law of equal. And because in order for you to love somebody who's, let's say, struggling, you would also have to have some sense of empathy, which is a sense of owning or to be able to put yourself in that person's shoe, right? The difference between sympathy is that you become that state that person's in. But empathy is a state of detachment where you are able to tap into and to see through, to feel through the person, but at the same time being touched enough that you are not becoming it. But in that state, you have to be able to see yourself in it for that split second.
I think it's the fluidity of perspective.
Yeah.
You can see it from their point of view, but you can also not have that bias of being them,
Right.
which is useful.
Because in order for any type of argument to come to a mutual conclusion, or even the sense of agreeing to disagree kind of state, in other words, where you are able to respect the other perspective, there has to be a removal or a sense of detachment from your own point of view being the only point of view. So you are, and without empathy, you do that. So, because the opposite of that is narcissism, right? Where you are absolutely, you have made a choice not to tap into the other person's point of feeling. So that's so what I was alluding to is, so if you are able to see yourself in that moment, if you are able to see yourself in the perpetrator, that's when you truly heal yourself as a victim, and therefore the true sense of closure occurs, and the narrative and the paradigm of being a ends there.
I think that's really scary for a lot of people because that pain sometimes is so familiar,
Absolutely.
and so, triggers and traumas and all that. It's almost like that's really a core part of people's identities, and myself included at times. And, to know that you should do that, to just heal that is great. But then I think also working on, do you want to heal this? And,
That's the thing.
the awareness of that is
That's the thing.
a whole other issue, which is also just as important.
That is the definite point, because even when you see the civil unrest, the issues with racism or any kind of clash in that regard, it definitely looks right, for that to be acknowledged, right? Or on a civil, physical, three-dimensional reality level, it looks right to seek justice.
Mm-hmm.
But justice in the end is about punishment, right? The true healing for the perpetrator doesn't happen because they were punished. It's because they begin to feel that what they've done, the remorse of what they've done. And the only way for them to feel that is because they begin to empathize with the person that they've inflicted that damage to.
I mean, and then conversely, if you experiencing that sort of abuse, and then having that empathy and insight and clarity to know that it's just a balancing out of energy. Once you realize that, seeking justice or vengeance, it doesn't feel good because you're inflicting something on somebody, knowing that they may have experienced this themselves and they're responding to a trauma in their own way.
So
however
they're
negative
just
it is,
perpetuating the vicious cycle.
but they
because
really just
they
need
create
the love.
a phenomena of reverse racism again, in that sense. In other words, we already know revenge doesn't work. It may relieve or vent.
It only feels good temporarily.
Right.
And you just,
but it doesn't
dissipate.
truly heal
No.
the victim narrative. And it doesn't end that experience for that particular person because they can encounter it somewhere else. So then the recognition that we are them and they are us, unity consciousness, is that the profound. This is the profound sense that I was feeling, and somebody iterated it so beautifully, and I think I wrote it down somewhere. That we are the vehicle or the medium to transform and. So in other words, even whether it's within us, because what's within us is out there in the world, and whether it's something that we recognize outside of us, in the end, as we own it as part of ourselves, then we are ultimately completely transforming that to wholeness of love, wholeness of light. And at the same time, in the unseen quantum level, we are also contributing to the uplift and transcendence of the rest of the world.
Sounds pretty important.
Yeah. And so
important work.
Then when we encounter something that is negative, it is an opportunity for positive. It is an opportunity for us to shed light into the areas of us to the extent that it triggers us to react, which reaction comes from that pre-existent state or wound or imprint, that it is actually something that is serving us. And therefore, violators or those that are instrumental in triggering that to come to surface is someone that is doing service to us.
Teachers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's a pretty controversial thing to say. I mean, I definitely understand that, but there's a lot of people who, the why me, the victimization.
Mm-hmm.
It's this trap that we can put ourselves into.
Absolutely.
And so by even saying, you're choosing this for yourself,
Oh, yeah.
it's pretty inflammatory.
Yeah, because immediately it'll trigger the sense of you're victim shaming, right?
Or how could you say that?
Right.
I didn't choose to get cancer or, XYZ. But
Right.
it really is all just...
Yeah, because the reason why we react with that is because we are also in the state of blame. So then we will feel blamed for what we're encountering as well. And so again, same thing. If we feel attacked, if we feel blamed for something or being faulted, then we must immediately bring to attention that something within us is attacking something else. Something within us is blaming something else. And therefore there's a cycle that's occurring. And that's the nature of the universe. What we put out is what comes back to us. Life is always responding to us.
Beautiful.
And that's when we come to the state of sovereignty. That's when we relinquish the energy of codependence to ask somebody else to do it for us, right? When we seek justice, when we seek punishment for those that hurt us in any way, or even asking them to take responsibility, asking them to apologize. All of this is a state of codependence, asking someone else to do it for us. But sovereignty says, I take what I can gain from this. Thank you. Really.
That's something that I need to definitely pay attention to. I mean,
But that will maximize the beauty of life in that regard, even in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about it, this is one thing that's definitely going to, to be one of the talking points that I'm on the book that I'm writing about divine design of relationship, is that it's never about the other person. It's never about the other person. Your partner is instrumental mirror in which, if you are, whether you're triggered or inspired, is for you, and vice versa, right? So when the best state or best form of a relationship, if we want to really maximize the full savoriness of that any relationship, is for one sovereign person to another to say, here's my best, here's my worst, show me yours. And I say, I am inspired by your best, and I learn from your worst. And therefore, we would be doing disservice to ourselves and to each other by trying to hide our worst or to try to control our aspects to cater to someone else.
I mean, it's a disservice because those parts that we're trying to hide are usually the ones that need the most love too.
Yeah.
And
maybe the very thing that inspires the other person to look within as well. Because when we are vulnerable, we often create an inspiration for others to share the same vulnerability. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's kind of like at parties where there's a dance floor and no one's dancing, right? But like if one person goes, within 5 minutes, it's full.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, okay, that person
especially
jumped,
if this person is, for example, not a great dancer, for example, but this person is just dancing the hell out of themselves.
Yeah.
It is an inspirational thing to see.
Yeah, that's my boyfriend's dancing style. It inspires joy because it's so ridiculous and you can't help but dance. So, yeah.
I'd like to see Steven dance. Oh, God. Yes, I can already see
King of
it.
Beauty. I'll try to record him secretly.
Yeah,
next time.
I'm a good dancer, thank you very much.
Yeah, what is the definition of a good dancer, I guess, is the thing.
He's having a good time. That's what he means.
There you go. There you go.
That's all that matters.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that, being flawless has nothing to do with anything related to good or positive. Some of the things.
Well, it speaks to the contrast you're talking about, right?
Right.
If you're flawless, in photography terms, it's boring, it's flat.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, if you're all light, then you would know that you are light in that regard. I mean, you wouldn't you wouldn't be here for that. So that's something that is definitely something that I would love to hear some feedback from our listeners on, because this applies to a lot of great things, and yet in the end, it's a very simple essence of life. To simply just equally acknowledge positive and negative as an equal value, then there's nothing that that can't be appreciated.
It's true. Perspective is everything.
Yeah.
There's another line, and I can't remember the author, but it's with one eye squinted, I can take it all as a blessing. And I love that, because it's like you just shift your perspective a little bit, and you're like, fuck yeah, it's all beautiful.
Yes.
So squinting my way through life. Trying to.
So yeah.
Yeah.
What else comes to mind for you when we talk about toxic positivity?
I think of just the times that I've done that, and that I can still do that, because it's easier. It's very easy to focus on the thing that makes you feel good, because it feels good, right? The compartmentalization of the negative. Put it away and let's focus on the positivity, and I'm just going to shift my gaze that way and completely ignore all of that. But all of that is still there. And it really, in the last year of just doing a ton of shadow work, it's freeing to just cast some light upon it, and let's look at these triggers and these wounds and these things that from time to time will make me so utterly miserable, right? And it's like you get to a point where you're like, fuck it, I don't want to feel this way anymore. Why am I hanging on to this? I can release it. It's fine. I've learned the lesson. And it's easier said than done. You have to really believe it. And then you'll see it. But yeah, I mean, the accepting both ends of that spectrum as both being really informative teachers is definitely vital to my personal journey.
Yeah. I mean, in that sense, ecstasy can be experienced in both ends of the spectrum as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, getting angry and mad, it feels great, and it's very cathartic as well. And by honoring something that does frustrate you for a split second of feeling all of it, and then you can just let it go.
Yeah.
But in the past, I've just put it away, because I'm I can't feel that right now. I've got too many things to do. I've got to do X, Y, Z in the next hour. I don't have time to have a breakdown. But usually that breakdown will squeeze itself in there anyways. So you might as well just feel all of it. Otherwise, it's going to come back for you. So
what that breakdown, I would like to definitely witness that. That sounds really fun. But you brought something very poignant there. You mentioned the term shadow work. That is definitely something that we'd like to talk about, isn't it? And we would like to definitely, on that note of shadow work, break this, punctuate this to part 2.